They would just have to live with it. I wonder if I will be allowed to make the rounds outside one of these days. This was something else his mother had told him. A merchant who does not know what is happening on the ground cannot sell anything. He had heard those words a long, long time ago, but he still remembered them. Perhaps he could convince them to send him to see the farming villages by claiming it was for a petition. He walked a lap around the courtyard, pondering how he might explain the situation so they would approve his expedition. As he walked, he heard shouting. He took a detour, heading toward the voices. He discovered they belonged to some burly men. They seemed to be fighting. A group of men had formed a circle. At the center, two of them were grappling with each other. They were wrestling. The shouting men were all smiling and laughing. They were enjoying themselves. Rikusen remembered them all to be soldiers. The kerchiefs around their heads were all the same color, a shade of blue. He judged their ranks by the colors of their sashes. Rikusen ducked in among the men, trying to get a closer look at the match. When it was over, the victor turned out to be someone he knew well. It was Jayakuo. The man who had been sipping tea with him earlier was now winning a wrestling match. Standing there sweating and laughing with his troops, he did not look like the ruler of an entire city. To those around him, he must have appeared as someone who shared the sentiments of those under him. Rikusen swallowed heavily. He did not think Jayakuo was wrestling with his minions simply to earn praise. He enjoyed it as much as they did. Rikusen did not want Jayakuo to notice him. If the governor invited him to wrestle, he feared he might be broken in half. He already felt guilty about being out for a walk simply because he wanted a break. This guilt would compel him to take part. He turned on his heel, determined to go back to his office. It suddenly seemed better to throw himself into his work than to try to get some fresh air. After all, he had been sent to the western capital to help with the excess work that Jayakuo could not handle himself. The burden on Rikusen was great, but the governor also had his own job to do. Even this friendly moment with his soldiers was an effective way of winning their hearts and minds. Rikusen thought back to a play he had seen a long time ago. In the play, a general spent the whole night drinking with his troops. It was a fleeting moment of enjoyment before they faced the battlefield, where they might be cut down at any instant. Jayakuo was much like that general. There were protagonists in this world and bit players. Rikusen understood that he was not one of the former. In a land at war, his role would have been to die without doing anything of note. Here in this world of peace, it was to do odd jobs and miscellaneous tasks. Jayakuo was different. He was a main character at the heart of the action, not like Rikusen. Rikusen heaved another great sigh. I suppose the western capital needs him. Jayakuo could steal the show in peace as well as war. Chapter 14 Selection. I felt surprisingly calm. Maomao gently pressed a hand to her mouth to keep her opinion from escaping. She washed her hands carefully and changed her clothes. Then she would go to the bath. That was all. She had dissected a human body for the first time. It was the corpse of a man hanged for burglary. Now his body was covered with incisions. If he had known he would be sliced up after he died, he might have reconsidered his life choices. I have to be sure to wash really well, Maomao thought. She sniffed her hands to see if they still smelled. She had perfumed her change of clothes to be extra sure, so she thought it was going to be all right. Nyang, she wasn't sure if she should stop or not. Only one person ever called her that. She turned back to see Tianyu. She didn't say a word. To do so would be as good as admitting that she would answer to Nyang. At the same time, though, it didn't feel quite right to just ignore him. If it turns out he is just going to prattle at me, though, I'm leaving. As a matter of fact, Tianyu had a good reason for stopping her today. Dr. Liu wants to talk to us, he said. What about my bath? Sounds like it will have to wait, Tianyu said with no small amount of disappointment. Apparently Maomao wasn't the only one who had been looking forward to washing up. Tianyu pressed his outfit to his nose and sniffed mightily. If she wasn't the only one being delayed, then Maomao could hardly complain. She followed Tianyu. She could not help noticing that the other apprentices all headed home. What about the rest of them? She asked. What else? They have been held back, Tianyu said, and then it made sense. The other apprentices had done well enough dissecting animals, but their hands had been shaking as they cut human flesh. It seemed only Maomao and Tianyu had managed to look like they belonged there, so he swung it too. Bah! Anyway, Maomao thought they might at least get a few more tries and sniffed her hands again. They were brought to a room with Dr. Liu, Maomao's old man that is, Liu Hemen and several other physicians. There was a long conference table lined with benches. Everyone was arranged around the far end. Are they all upper physicians? All the men present were skilled and learned. The medical office, like everywhere else, had its hierarchy. Broadly speaking, the physicians were commonly referred to as being upper, middle, or apprentice. Maomao rubbed her eyes, for in that august company she saw someone she would never have expected. He waved eagerly to her. His eyes were kind and his frame was portly. He bore a loach-like moustache despite being a eunuch. Master physician, Maomao said. This could, of course, be qualified as rear palace physician. He was the quack. What is he doing here? I mean, I guess it makes sense, kind of. She may have questioned his medical skill, but he managed the rear palace's medical office alone. This meant he deserved a title similar to the other leading physicians. Still, he appeared noticeably out of place. He sat there feeling small among the men who seemed distinguished by their intellect and skills. When you considered it, the physician had been frightened to even touch a dead body. How had he ever risen from apprentice to physician? It was a mystery. One of the 7 wonders of the royal court, some might say. Maomao's thoughts were interrupted by a clap. It looks like we are all here, Dr. Liu said, quieting the murmuring room. Maomao realized several middle physicians had joined them at some point. They were looking at Maomao as if she was even more out of place here than the quack. He was not as physically impressive as the others, but a woman in the middle of this gathering of men would always draw attention. All right, let's begin. You can take any open seat. It was easy for him to say. The upper physicians were already seated. Now the middle physicians began to move. Tianyu, an apprentice, remained standing. Maomao did likewise, waiting until everyone else had a seat. Dr. Liu's invitation sounded universal, but there was still a hierarchy here. There was an order. It might be different in an emergency, but at this moment it would be best to respect protocol if she didn't want to cause unnecessary friction. Tianyu took the lowest seat of all. Maomao occupied the final remaining chair after him. So I find myself in another ambiguous position, she thought. It appeared no one dared to sit beside the upper physicians. Therefore the only available seat was next to the quack. He offered her a friendly grin as she sat down. My, it has been a while, he said. Have a bite. He furtively showed her the candy he was hiding under the table. What is he, the neighborhood auntie? Maomao thought, but she said, maybe not right now. It was best to politely decline. She would never be able to concentrate on the discussion with candy rolling around in her mouth. Dr. Liu was glaring at them. The quack hadn't noticed he had been noticed. Dr. Liu proceeded to explain why he had called them here. He evidently chose to overlook the quack's full cheeks. I've gathered you together so we can decide who is to go to the Western capital, he said. The same subject Maomao had overheard him discussing with Jinshi. Jinshi wanted physicians to accompany him on the long journey. He wanted 2 more if possible. 2 more. Maomao wondered how many there already were. In the heat of the moment, Maomao had suggested herself as a candidate. She did not know whether anything would come of it. She knew that if she wasn't chosen it would mean trouble for her, lots of trouble. Dr. Liu asked, is there anyone here who specifically wants to go to the Western capital? Maomao looked around and was about to raise her hand, but someone else raised his hand first. Question, sir. If someone had a question, then Maomao couldn't volunteer just yet. She let her hand slide back down. The parameters of this trip were far too vague. Why are we being asked to go to the Western capital? Is this a punishment? The speaker was one of the middle physicians, and he was supposed to be quite adept. Maomao didn't remember his name. It is a fair question, actually. Jinshi had already spoken to her about this trip, so she naturally assumed it was simply a long expedition. Someone who didn't know the circumstances could easily think that Jinshi was effectively being demoted. Wait, is he? A punitive posting, a demotion. Jinshi's words suggested he would depart quickly, and it didn't seem like a demotion. To everyone else, though, it appeared His Majesty and Empress Jayakayu both wanted Jinshi to take a long journey. The emperor had a couple of princes, so even his own brother seemed like an obstacle. What is this? Is it a punishment? The quack asked Maomao quietly, sounding concerned. Had he not heard about it? It seemed all the other upper physicians were familiar with the matter. Perhaps the quack had been left out of the loop specifically because he was considered a quack. Perhaps he had been so busy sucking on some candy that he missed it. Dr. Liu coughed pointedly. Maomao was left with no choice but to pretend she hadn't heard the portly doctor. This assignment is not punitive. However, it will be a long trip, considering the destination. Even with the most optimistic estimate, you should expect to be away from the capital for at least 3 months. Is there a war starting? It was a difficult subject, but this middle physician didn't mince words. The assembled doctors began muttering, and the quack clung to Maomao in fear. She could practically feel everyone looking at them. My dear Gen, if you would be so kind, Lumen said, nudging the quack. He has a name. It is Gen. Maomao had never had a chance to find out his name in the rear palace. Everyone simply called him Doctor. Okay, maybe she had heard it somewhere along the line, but quite frankly, remembering people's names was not one of Maomao's special skills. That soldier would never forget, she thought, picturing Rikyusen. He had been sent to the western capital, hadn't he? For him, it was certainly a demotion. The quack released Maomao, but held on to Lumen instead. What do you think of all this, Lumen? Let's hear him out and see where this goes. Dr. Liu was so completely tired of the quack's antics at this point that he had stopped even looking at him. Being completely unaware was, in its own way, a kind of genius. I cannot believe they have not fired him yet. How he still had a job was one of life's mysteries. Dr. Liu said, I cannot speak to the possibility of war. Our business is to treat the sick and the injured. We do as we are told. This trip promises to be a very large-scale one. Dr. Liu was not finding a warm reception among the physicians. It seemed unlikely that anyone would volunteer. They might change their tune if he told them who was at the center of this expedition. Jinshi was a member of the royal family. A physician who went with him might have the opportunity to speak to him personally. However, I am not sure it has been made public that Jinshi is going. Considering his status, the matter would probably be kept quiet until the last moment. Because of this, nobody would raise their hand. Maomao was becoming more comfortable and was about to raise her hand again. She saw Dr. Liu glare at her. What was with him? She wondered. Was he telling her not to volunteer? Did her lowly status ultimately stand in her way? Were there no volunteers? I suspected as much. I have come prepared with a list of 3 candidates, but I would like to fill one more place. Does nobody want the final seat? Despite Dr. Liu's prompting, no one reacted. The upper physicians looked outright tired of this. Perhaps they had already heard the story. Yes, sir, one person raised his hand. It was Tianyu. I know I am still an apprentice, but if no one else will go, may I? He sounded chipper as ever. He seemed as happy as if he were dissecting an animal or a human being. Maomao had thought Tianyu must be a brazen man because of his persistence despite NN's total indifference. But as she spoke with him during their work, she gradually came to understand that wasn't the case. Tianyu simply did not experience the broad fluctuations of emotion that other people did. He tended to be very talkative. Outsiders might think he was emotional, but it was possible he spoke to NN because he was intrigued by her chilly reception. No one else gave him that. Maomao thought he was a twisted guy. She did not feel inclined to push the matter. Everyone had their foibles. Anyone else? Dr. Liu asked. No hands went up. The upper physicians collectively exhaled. She was sure he could get one of them if they knew Jinshi was coming. With Dr. Liu in charge, though, it would never happen. Maomao thought her father Liumen would be a good candidate. He was deeply knowledgeable about the western reaches and knew the language well. But she shook her head. He was too old and not strong enough anymore. Becoming a eunuch had left him even more aged than simply being old. Having a missing kneecap did not help him at all. Such a long journey was beyond his capabilities. If 3 people had already been chosen, what would happen to Maomao? She supposed she just had to have faith that she was already on the list. It seemed like a shame. Many people dismissed the western capital as a rural backwater, but nothing could be further from the truth. It was a thriving city and a nexus of western culture. It was also a place where it would be much easier to acquire the newest medical skills and technology. Am I sure Pops won't go? Even as she asked the question, she knew he wouldn't go. She knew it was impossible. Liu Humen still had the quack stuck to him. He didn't look thrilled, but he couldn't pull himself free. Is there anyone else? Dr. Liu asked again. The overachieving middle physician raised his hand once more. Are you volunteering? Dr. Liu said. The physician looked directly at Maomao. Another question, sir. What is one of our court ladies doing here? No doubt the question was on everyone's mind, but they all sensed this was not quite the time to ask. Surely her exceptional presence shouldn't mean she is to be counted among the physicians. Boy, I hope so. If Maomao could finally get her answer right here and now, that would be wonderful. The rest of the room did not share her enthusiasm. The upper physicians did not betray much reaction, almost as if they were not listening anymore. The looks from the middle physicians were scathing. Tianyu watched the scene unfold with no particular change in expression. She is not to be considered a physician. She is coming with us, Dr. Liu said. Maomao felt a wave of relief. He had found a compromise. The important thing was that she was able to go along. Sir, I'm not sure a court lady is suited for such a long trip. The middle physician would not give up. I grant she may not have the stamina of a man, but she has passed the practical examination. She has the skills of a physician, if nothing else. Furthermore, to be quite frank, her knowledge of medicines is probably better than yours. When we run out of medical supplies at our destination, it will be helpful to have someone who can make substitutes using the ingredients at hand without needing a textbook. Dr. Liu could be harsh, but he was also a firm judge of character and ability. The middle physicians still seemed less than pleased. Some of them looked at Maomao with disbelief. It was as if they were asking, that examination? And are we really sure about this? If you are still unhappy that a woman is coming along and being treated the same as you, then think of it this way. It will be a large group this time. Many other court ladies will accompany us to assist with administrative duties. You do not object to a little extra help, do you? It remains true that this is the first time a lady has been brought along specifically for medical purposes. And to make her take the examination, that is going too far, Dr. Liu, even for you. This middle physician seemed to be the opposite of Tianyu. He was a bit of a pest, but he did seem concerned for Maomao. Even his most thoughtless remarks were things she might have appreciated at another time, but right now was not one of those times. Dr. Liu said, sounding almost annoyed, I didn't make this decision. His next announcement was enough to stop anyone from disagreeing. Grand Commandant Kang will be joining us this time. That sent a buzz among the middle physicians. Maomao felt all her hair stand on end. She looked at Liu Humen, who looked back at her mournfully. Maomao was not in N, but she was on the verge of grinding her teeth. Do you all think you can handle him? Asked Dr. Liu, sounding dangerously close to despair. That was enough to silence any further objections. Perhaps Dr. Liu should have kept this confidential information to himself. Regardless, the other physicians would certainly take anyone who could help them with this particular person. Maomao, however, did not have time to think the matter through in such a calm and rational fashion. She felt a surge of anger, a single instant of pure fury. That man, he knew. For the first time in a long while, Maomao wished Jinchi was there. She wanted to look at him as if he were a worm stranded in a puddle. Dr. Liu wasn't finished speaking. We leave in 5 days. I will give you all the time off to prepare, so say your goodbyes and get ready to go. Maomao's mouth hung open and she could not get it to close. Chapter 15 Preparations. They were to leave in 5 days. It happened so quickly that Maomao had to hurry to get ready. She needed to do the shopping, and she had several people she needed to speak with. Perhaps I shouldn't have told everyone I am leaving town, she thought, but a message had already been sent, so it was clearly all right. I really must tell the old madam. She did not want to be greeted by another punch to the stomach when she returned home, so she went to the verdigris house where the madam said, is that so? In that case I want some ambergris as a souvenir. That is not going to happen. The name of the substance in Maomao's language meant dragon's saliva incense. It was indeed said to be made from a dragon's drool, although that was not evidently where it truly came from. It was very expensive and also had medicinal functions. It was effective for the heart. What do you mean you are leaving again? This is ridiculous. I have never heard of a court lady going so far from the court so often. This anguished objection came from the apprentice apothecary, Seizan. There were even tears in his eyes. I am sorry. You will just have to manage somehow. You have Kokyu and you can always get in touch with my father if anything comes up. Maomao handed him a signed sheet of paper and that was it. A customer had arrived at the apothecary shop, so Seizan trudged back to help them. Maomao thought he was more of an apothecary than he gave himself credit for. He was certainly a chronic worrier. Perhaps this caused him to think less of himself than he deserved. Goodness gracious. You had better be careful. They say the sun in the west can give you an awful tan. That was what Maomao's older sister Perrin said at the Verdigris house. Her skin had a particularly healthy glow today. Did you have a good customer last night?